kind of a nuanced issue. So I want to kind of talk through all the bases. So many of you know about the Federal Trade Commission. I'm sure you've heard of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which operates kind of in that sphere with them. And the Federal Trade Commission was created by an act. It was created by a law that was passed a while ago. I believe it's called the Federal Trade Act, FTA, I think it is. And so the FTC, their purpose is to go after deceptive behaviors by companies for anything, really. It's deceptive advertising, deceptive practices, saying essentially if you're lying to consumers, the Federal Trade Commission can go after you. And in that, the Federal Trade Commission has the power to what's called enjoin you. So enjoining is a legal term which means to stop someone from doing. The term injunction comes from there. Injunction is to stop someone from what they're doing. Stop someone from doing what they're doing. So there's this section in the Federal Trade Act. I think I have the name of that right, but if I don't, just correct me here. 13B. And 13B of this act says that the Federal Trade Commission, for deceptive and unfair practices, can impose permanent injunctions on corporations or on entities who are deceiving consumers. Okay, sounds great. And by the way, the FTCA has done a lot of good work. Payday lending is something they've tackled. The CFPB had a little bit more power to do it, and they were doing things related to financial crimes. But unfortunately, the CFPB has more or less been made toothless thanks to the Trump administration cutting all of its money. Hopefully, Biden will give it its claws back, give it its funding back, and put people on it who are actually going to enforce it. It's a great organization. They do really great work. They've returned billions of dollars to consumers, and there are lots of fraudsters out there, so they really need to be doing that job with the FTC. So the FTC sued this company called AMG, and essentially they're a payday lender. If you don't know what a payday loan is, good. But also, so a payday loan essentially is you go into these places, they're typically set up in poor neighborhoods, and they say, look, if you pay me, you go into a payday loan place and you say, hey, I need a loan, and they say, okay, well, we'll cut this loan against your paycheck, so you just give your paycheck to me. I'll give you the equivalent of your paycheck now, and when you get paid, you pay me, and we'll be even, right? That's the idea. Problem with payday loans is that the interest rate because these the loan turns around in 2 weeks, the interest rate is incredibly high. The interest rate for payday lenders is like 600% or something like that. So they can make a tidy profit on an interest rate even in 2 weeks. So, excuse me. So they make a tidy profit even in 2 weeks. So you get to this point where it's essentially a scam, right? You will essentially forever be in debt to this company. There is no way that you can ever pay this back, and that's kind of the point, right? So it traps you in debt more or less forever, even though it seems like an easy way out, and it'll be easy to pay back because the loan just grows exponentially. Like every day, every week you don't pay it back, it grows by a lot because the interest rate is just so high. So this is a payday loan company, and they were sued by the FTC. And what the FTC was trying to do was, one, permanently enjoin them, and I just told you what that was. So essentially, to permanently stop them from doing this particular payday loan scheme. But also, it said, hey, you've robbed people of all this money. We're going to require you to give it back to the taxpayer, right? There was a fine in there. It was a pretty hefty fine. My guess is, with most FTC fines, you see that the fine is not nearly as high as it could be, as it should be. It doesn't really stop. Sorry, let me put it another way. It's not really equivalent to the amount of money the company made, right? So, like if they made $100, the fine might be $1 type of thing, right? obviously scaled up, but they get the general idea. If they stole 100 million, they might get fined $1 million. They made 99 million profit off that. Obviously, that's not a deterrent, right? So anyway, that aside, there was a fine. The idea was that this company was going to have to pay back all this money, and that it would be used, either it would be distributed to individual taxpayers, which sometimes happens, or it's just used for the FTC's enforcement, and they're able to bring that money into the treasury to be used for whatever it's going to be used for, right? And this is usually a really positive thing. Unfortunately, this week, the Supreme Court pretty much gutted the FTC's ability to bring justice in these cases, because it said that Section 13B does not allow for the FTC to seek monetary relief. And relief, by the way, is just a legal term for what you can get out of, like a settlement in a sense. It's just an amount of money that the company pays to, to make up for the wrongdoing it has that's done. That's what relief is. It's just an amount of something given to the people who are asking for something because they've been wronged, right? You ask for relief from your wrong. So the Supreme Court essentially ruled, and unanimously too, and quick aside here, I know we're getting into the weeds with this issue, but I think it's important. So Supreme Court precedent, it has gravitas, which is just sense, it has a weightiness to it, right? It has a power to it. It's less likely to be overturned. But the only way that typically happens is cases that are, the more justices side on the side of the opinion that's being written, the less likely it is that the opinion will be overturned in the future. So this opinion was a unanimous opinion, which means that this decision is almost impossible for this decision to be overturned by the court, right? The court is very unlikely to do this. Luckily, the Federal Trade Act is a law which allows for the Congress to come in and change the law and right the wrong of this decision. And by the way, this 100% is a bad decision. From a legal perspective, I don't actually know if it's the wrong decision, but the FTC has been doing this for a long time. They've been charging people money for committing wrongs against the American people, and there hadn't been an issue more or less up until now with the section of the act. And this act is fairly old, as I mentioned earlier. So the worry here is that this ruling is going to make it very hard for the FTC to do their job, because Congress has been incredibly slow about moving anything right now, and I doubt that an amended version of the Federal Trade Act is going to get through. Two, this was a unanimous ruling, so the likelihood the Supreme Court will take up a similar case and rule the other way is very, very small, if not impossible. And three, in the meanwhile, these companies can scam people, and the most that the FTC can do is say, hey, you have to stop doing that. But if you're a bad guy, or a bad gal, or non-binary person, and you are scamming people out of all their money, and you get to keep all that money, and the only thing that happens when you get sued is they say, hey, you, stop doing that. It's bad. And you're like, okay, fine, I'll stop doing it. But you've already run out the back with all the money, right? You already have all the money. So it's not really a punishment. It's essentially say, hey, enjoy your early retirement with all that money you stole, right? So, and look, FTC fines typically aren't nearly high enough, but that's an issue for another day. For now, this is an important issue. It's an important worker issue, because the people who are getting scammed by these scams, that's fine. Sentence is fine. The people who are getting scammed are typically working class people. They're regular people who get tricked into giving away their Social Security number, or they're tricked into taking a payday loan when they can't afford one, or like during the housing crisis, buying houses they couldn't afford, right? These scams are directed at working people. They're collecting these scam fees little bits at a time, but just from lots of working people. So if the FTC can't return that money to you, then at the end of the day, even though they've told the scammer to stop, a lot of some are corporations. They can just fold up shop and set up another corporation so the scamming can continue. Also, they've run out the door with all the money. And third, and I think perhaps most importantly, is us, the regular people. We're already out of that money. We've lost it already. We are still in that terrible position that we were in, where we don't have money because it's been scammed away from us. So this decision is actually really, really worrying for me personally as a lawyer, but also just as a consumer, right? We need to be super vigilant. There are lots of scams going on right now, lots of COVID-19 related scams. So please, please be careful who you give your money to. Be careful who you give your ID to, because it looks like the watchdogs have essentially been defanged on behalf of corporate America. And it's really disappointing. And I hope that there are some really strong laws that are passed soon, although I can't say I'm particularly hopeful. But in the meanwhile, be super careful with your information, be super careful with your money, and hopefully we don't get scammed. Because if we do, there's no one coming to save us, unfortunately.